The zoning notice was taped to my dead mother's mailbox, and the woman standing next to it was smiling like she'd done me a favor. The board voted unanimously, Vanessa Kilbride said, tapping her clipboard against her thigh. Your Bottomland is now designated Phase 3 Riverbend Estates. You should be thanking us. That swamp was a liability. 312 acres, cleared by my great-grandfather's hands in 1899. Gone in a vote I wasn't there to cast, while I was 11 time zones away, standing watch on a river that wasn't mine, thinking about the one that was. Here are the numbers so you understand what we're dealing with. $2.4 million. That's what the developer paid for my family's floodplain, land the county tax rolls had valued at $90,000. $600,000. That's what disappeared into a shell account before the ink was dry on the sale. 41 homes on Meadowbrook Lane. That's how many mortgages exist on that street. I want you to remember that last number, 41. Because by the time this story is over, Vanessa Kilbride will lose her house, her freedom, and something she valued a lot more than either, her reputation at the country club. She'll pay $410,000 in restitution, and almost none of it will be for the land she stole. What she didn't know, standing there in her cream-coloured blazer with her clipboard and her Range Rover idling in my dead father's gravel driveway, was that I don't just farm Bottomland. I hold paper. I hold it quietly, the way my grandfather taught me, the way you hold a card you don't play until the table's gone all in. She thought she was talking to a broke old soldier come home to a flooded pasture. She was talking to her own bank. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from tonight, because this one gets ugly before it gets righteous, and I want to know who's riding along. My name is Daniel Whitfield. I'm 63 years old, and 3 weeks before Vanessa Kilbride taped that notice to my mother's mailbox, I was still in Bahrain, finishing out my last rotation with the Army Corps of Engineers. 22 years of moving rivers on paper before I ever moved one for real. I designed levees. I calculated flood stage. I understood, better than almost anyone alive, exactly how much water a piece of land could hold before it gave way. I mention that because it matters later. Everything in this story matters later. The land came from my great-grandfather, Elias Whitfield, who walked out of Tennessee in 1899 with a mule, a broadaxe, and a wife 6 months pregnant, and cleared 312 acres of Missouri River bottomland by hand. He built the barn first, before the house, because you don't leave a mule in the weather while you sleep dry. My father used to tell me that like it was scripture. There's still a nail in that barn, hand-forged, that Elias drove himself. I've run my thumb over the head of it more times than I can count. 3 generations are buried on a rise above the Northfield, under a stand of bur oaks that my grandfather refused to clear even when the tractor could have done it in an afternoon. Elias, his son Thomas, my father, Raymond, who died the year I shipped out to Bahrain, with dirt still under his fingernails from turning the garden one last time. The house smells like it always did. Diesel from the equipment shed, hay dust settled into the floorboards, and under all of it, faint but always there, the given-up smell of river water when the Missouri runs high in spring. I grew up knowing the sound of that river the way other kids knew traffic. I knew when it was rising by the pitch of it at night. What Vanessa Kilbride didn't know, what almost nobody in Riverbend Estates knew, is that my grandfather didn't just farm. In 1931, watching half his neighbors lose their land to bank foreclosures during the Depression, he pooled what little cash the family had with 2 other stubborn farmers and chartered a tiny agricultural lending company, Whitfield Ag Trust. It never had a storefront, it never had a billboard. It loaned money to farmers the big banks wouldn't touch, and over 90-some years, through mergers nobody outside a courthouse ever noticed, it became something considerably larger than 3 farmers with a shared ledger book. I inherited controlling interest the day my father died. I never advertised it. I never even used it. I kept farming corn and soybeans on what Bottomland wasn't already flooding, drove a 14-year-old Silverado, wore the same 3 flannel shirts on rotation, and let the HOA board assume exactly what they wanted to assume, that Daniel Whitfield was land poor, deployment broke, and easy to push around. Vanessa Kilbride was 52 years old and built like she'd never once doubted a decision in her life. She drove a white Range Rover with a vanity plate that said KLBRD1, wore a rotating wardrobe of blazers that cost more than my truck payment, and carried a clipboard everywhere like it was a badge of office. She'd been president of the Riverbend Homeowners Association for 6 years, and in that time she'd rezoned 2 greenbelts, fined a widow $400 for a garden gnome, and, I'd learned soon enough, quietly partnered with a developer named Marcus Pell to turn every square foot of undeveloped land near that river into cash. She smiled at me that Tuesday afternoon, 2:47 p.m., like she was doing me a kindness. I didn't smile back. I took a photograph of the notice, checked my watch, and wrote the time down in a small notebook I keep in my breast pocket, the same notebook I used to log river levels for 22 years. Old habits. They were about to become the most dangerous thing in that woman's life.